Welcome to the deep dive. We all know climate change is this huge global challenge. But what if the best way to really understand it and maybe solve it isn't just about the science or the economics? What if it's fundamentally about justice? About, well, accountability for past actions? Today, we're diving into exactly that idea with a really powerful book, Climate Justice: What Rich Nations Owe the World in the Future. Our mission here is to explore the core arguments, the really thought-provoking stuff it brings up about ethics, politics, and money in the climate crisis. And yeah, it doesn't shy away from controversy. Okay, let's unpack this. The book kicks off with something that feels, pretty fundamental in everyday life. Like, if someone causes harm, they should stop, right? And they should compensate for the damage already done. Seems simple.
Basic fairness, really.
But applying that simple idea to, well, centuries of industrial emissions and their impacts today, that's where the book argues things get revolutionary and, frankly, pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah, because there's this huge disconnect, isn't there?
Exactly. You have the wealthiest nations, the ones historically responsible for most greenhouse gases.
Right, the ones who industrialized first.
And they've largely, failed to take full responsibility for the consequences.
Consequences hitting poor nations the hardest, disproportionately so.
And that's the core problem this book tackles head on.
Absolutely. And when you talk about who owes what, you really have to look back at the history. It's crucial.
For sure. I mean, think about the U.S., nations in Europe. They built their modern societies, their wealth, for centuries using fossil fuels.
And emitting carbon pretty freely while doing it.
It was like this massive, unpriced advantage that fueled their growth.
Yeah, and what's fascinating, or maybe disturbing, is the direct line you can draw from that historical advantage to today's climate crisis.
Right.
While those nations got rich, many developing countries are now facing the worst effects. Effects from emissions they barely contributed to.
And these aren't abstract effects.
No, not at all. We're talking rising seas threatening to just, swallow whole island nations like Tuvalu.
It's terrific.
Or devastating droughts like in the Sahel, turning farmland to dust. Or those catastrophic floods in Pakistan recently, displacing millions.
Yeah.
Food insecurity worsening. It all links back. And this stark reality, that's what really builds the case for this idea of climate debt.
Climate debt.
Yeah, the idea that it's not just an environmental issue, but there's this historical burden, an economic and, well, a moral obligation that's been created.
That concept, climate debt, it's incredibly potent.
Yeah.
But, okay, how does the book handle the sheer complexity of actually calculating that? Across history, across nations.
Right.
Is there a danger? It just stays a powerful metaphor instead of a practical plan.
That's a really fair point. And the book does try to address the practical side by highlighting a specific tool.
Okay.
And this is where I think it gets really interesting for a lot of people.
Get on us.
It focuses on this concept called the social cost of carbon.
Ah, okay. I've heard of that, but maybe explain it for listeners.
Sure. So the book explains it as basically the economic value, the dollar value of all the damages caused by releasing just 1 extra ton of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere.
1 ton. And what kind of damages are we talking?
Everything. Health impacts from pollution, crop failures, damage from storms and floods, ecosystem loss. It tries to quantify all of it.
Wow. And the author calls this?
The most important number you've never heard of. Quite a claim.
Okay, yeah, that definitely grabs your attention.
So this raises the question, why is it so important? How should we use this number?
Right.
And the key insight, the book argues, isn't just the number itself, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
It's realizing that for decades, maybe centuries, we've essentially given polluters a massive free pass, an invisible subsidy.
Like pollution was free?
Exactly. Or even negatively priced, if you think about the subsidies fossil fuels often get. So this social cost of carbon, it's an attempt to finally make that hidden cost visible.
And demand accountability based on it.
Precisely. It says every ton of CO2 has a real measurable cost. And if we can quantify the damage per ton,
then we can start assigning responsibility more concretely.
Yes. It shifts the conversation from just talking vaguely about emissions to calculating actual economic impacts. It's about figuring out how we globally quantify this harm and, crucially, how we make polluters pay for it, internalize those costs.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What if we'd known this number or taken it seriously 50, 100 years ago?
Imagine. The world could look very different.
It's like trying to invoice someone for the air they used decades ago. It feels huge.
It is.
So, okay, if we accept this ethical framework, this idea of quantifiable harm and historical responsibility,
Yeah.
What does the book say comes next?
Well, it makes a very direct call for something it terms reparative justice.
Reparative justice, so going beyond just cutting emissions now.
Exactly. This isn't framed as simply giving aid or charity to developing nations.
Why?
It's presented explicitly as compensation. Compensation for the damages they've suffered, and importantly, for the development opportunities they've lost because of climate change impacts they didn't cause.
So rich nations owe financial support, technological help.
Yes. Not out of kindness, the book argues, but because of this moral and historical obligation.
It uses that analogy like a neighbor blasting music for years, cracking your walls, and then just turning the music down and saying, okay, we're good now.
Yeah, the book's point is accountability doesn't work like that. You have to fix the damage you caused.
You've really nailed the core shift in thinking there. And the book pushes this further, right, into how we think about solutions.
Absolutely, because if you connect this reparative justice idea to the bigger picture, you see, climate change isn't some neutral force hitting everyone equally.
No, clearly not.
It acts like an amplifier for existing global inequalities. Developing nations, the ones who did the least to cause the problem, are getting hit hardest.
And they have the fewest resources to deal with it.
Exactly. Less money, weaker infrastructure, less capacity to adapt. Think about, say, a major hurricane hitting Florida versus hitting Haiti.
The difference in impact and recovery is stark.
Immense. Wealthy places have insurance, warning systems, government aid, robust infrastructure. Poorer nations often lack all of that, leading to much greater loss of life, displacement, economic devastation.
So fairness and equity have to be central.
They have to be. The book argues that any climate solution that ignores these massive disparities isn't just incomplete, it could actually make existing injustices even worse.
Wow. So it really transforms climate change from just an environmental problem into this very immediate, very human issue of fairness, equity, and moral responsibility.
Precisely. It forces us to see that there are victims, and there are those largely responsible for creating the conditions for that victimhood.
So given that powerful moral framework, what actual pathways forward does the book explore? What tools does it suggest for tackling this climate debt and achieving that reparative justice?
Well, it looks at tools we sometimes already discussed, like carbon pricing.
Okay. Putting a price on emissions.
Yes, but it pushes further. It asks how you structure that pricing, so it genuinely compensates historical victims, not just discourages future pollution.
So where does the money go?
Exactly. Should revenues from carbon taxes in rich countries be directly channeled into climate adaptation and, importantly, loss and damage funds for vulnerable nations?
Loss and damage being a key term there.
A huge one. It also examines international agreements, focusing on the Paris Accord, not just as a treaty, but as this, maybe imperfect but critical attempt to formally recognize common but differentiated responsibilities.
Acknowledging different roles and abilities.
Right. And it even explores potential legal avenues. Could international courts or arbitration bodies eventually play a role in enforcing climate reparations, building on existing environmental law, perhaps?
Interesting. So policy, international agreements, maybe even legal routes.
And underpinning all of that is a strong emphasis on collective action. It stresses this isn't just for governments. Corporations, even individuals, share a moral duty to act responsibly.
Okay, so that covers the core arguments and potential actions. When you look at the book overall, what are its main strengths? What makes it stand out?
I'd say a major strength is definitely its clarity. It manages to explain some pretty complex economic and ethical ideas, like that social cost of carbon, in a really accessible way.
Makes it easier to grasp for a wider audience.
Definitely. And framing climate change primarily as a justice issue gives it this powerful moral force, this urgency. It's not just about polar bears, it's about people suffering now due to past actions.
Yeah, that's compelling.
And crucially, it's global perspective. So many climate books feel very Western-centric. This one consistently keeps the focus on the disproportionate impacts on developing nations and frames solutions through the lens of global equity. That feels really important and, frankly, quite refreshing.
That global view does seem vital. But are there weaknesses? Or maybe points where readers might push back?
Sure, no book is perfect. While it is clear, some readers might still find the sections digging into the details of, say, reparations calculations or international legal mechanisms a bit dense. They might require more concentration.
Okay, fair enough.
And then there's the big one, the political feasibility. While the ethical case for global reparations is argued very strongly, Critics often point out the immense political hurdles.
Like, would wealthy nations actually agree to pay?
Exactly. How do you precisely calculate historical debt across so many countries and over such long time spans? And would governments, facing their own domestic pressures, ever realistically agree to the kind of massive wealth transfers the book implies might be necessary?
Especially if their own population see it as unfair or unaffordable.
Right. So there's this undeniable tension between the powerful moral argument for justice and the messy political realities of getting global agreement and action on that scale, at least in the short term.
So what does this all mean for us, for you listening? It really pushes you to grapple with that tension, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Between the clear moral imperative, the book lays out the need for action, for compensation, and then the very real, practical, political, maybe economic challenges of actually doing it on a global scale.
Yeah, it's a conversation that forces you to think about reconciling ideals with reality, or maybe redefining what realistic even means when faced with such a huge injustice.
Yeah. Ultimately, climate justice forces a fundamental reframing. It argues climate change isn't just about CO2 levels. It's deeply about fairness, ethical responsibility, and acknowledging this concept of climate debt and the need for reparative action.
It's a powerful call to examine our own roles as individuals, as nations in this interconnected world, and to understand that the past isn't really past, it's actively shaping our present crisis.
So perhaps the final thought to leave you with, building on the both's arguments.
Maybe it's this. What does responsibility truly mean today for us as individuals, for our nations in this interconnected world staring down the climate crisis? How do we actually balance that idealism, that ethical pull towards responsibility, with the political and economic realities we face when trying to get global action? It's a tough question.
It really is. It challenges us to look beyond maybe our immediate bubbles, our immediate self-interest, and think about our place in a collective future. We definitely encourage you to keep exploring these ideas: climate action, global justice, ethical responsibility. What could a truly just future actually look like? And what part might you play in building it? Lots to think about from this deep dive. We hope it sparks some thoughts. Until next time.